Hey guys, it's Crystal Briefs. In this video, I'm going to talk about heroes and familiars that should go on the wall when defending a rally, solos, etc. Before getting into this, I have to tell you that there's no single formula for what to put on the wall. Each of you have to think to yourself and decide the best arrangement for yourself. But don't worry, the purpose of this video is to help you with that. I'll point your thoughts to the right direction so that you can tailor the wall arrangement to your account, free to play or pay to play. First things first, the wall setup depends on what you want to take care of the most. It's a matter of personal preference. I guess the majority wants to take care of the worst case scenario in which you get fully countered, which I also happen to prefer, so I'll base my argument around that. But I'll also discuss other options that might suit other preferences, like if you want to reduce as much reds as possible when you counter the rally. First, about heroes. Let's say you have all the army heroes that you can choose from. By the way, army heroes, as most people say, should go on the wall. So if you don't have one, you can start slow rolling the pay-to-play army heroes, and I'll have different recommendations later on in the meantime. My recommendation in general would be to have one hero for the front line and two heroes for the back line to take care of the worst case scenario. So if you normally sit in ranged wedge, the formation of which I recommend during offline, you'd have Strong Stress of the Sea, Watcher, Berserker, Storm Fox, and Lore Weaver. The reason being is that when you get countered, having more 200% squad attack at the back line will kill the enemy faster, thereby indirectly reducing your reds, and you'll last a bit longer when you're offline. Having two heroes at the front when being countered makes little difference because 200% squad attack also gets diminished by the counter. This is based on the theories I have, so if you've experimented yourself and found the results contrary to what I just said, I really appreciate you comment down below. Then of course, it's better to have more than one heroes for the front line when you counter the opponent. By the way, only gold heroes should sit on the wall. If you have like purple Strong Stress of the Sea, you should change that to gold Trickster. The tactical skill, 200% squad attack, is usually way more important than the army stats. That said, I can think of a situation in which purple Strong Stress of the Sea actually outperforms Trickster. So if you have a good reason, you don't have to swap out purple army hero, but if you don't, make sure to have gold heroes from one of the three troop types. Siege heroes should never go on the wall. Next, what if you don't have pay-to-play army heroes? Here, a lot of you might have Watcher as your leader or the Rose Knight. These heroes should be on the wall no matter what because they have army stats that buff all the defending troops. The problem is though, what other three heroes to put? I'm assuming all of you are sitting in front or ranged front when you are offline, because cav front is the quickest way for you to get zeroed. In those usual cases, you should have two heroes at the front that has HP for that particular troop type, even when you get countered. Snow Queen and Black Crow in this case. It's debatable if you should put Bombing Goblin because it only has 20% army attack without any HP. In my opinion, heroes with HP should be prioritized on the wall to reduce the damage at the front line. So if you're ranged front, you'll have to reduce the damage you take. Well, Black Crow doesn't have attack stat, so if you have like Petite Devil, you should swap that in. And the last hero will be a cav equivalent to better deal with the counter. It's also important to have HP for the backline to reduce the damage from Pact 5 familiars. If you're in front, you'll have 2 inf and 2 ranged here. I think you can add Bombing Goblin to the wall because it's not in the front line. You could have 2 cav heroes instead to better deal with when you are countering. Also, you could have 3 heroes for the same troop type, but make sure to know what you're doing and give it a purpose. I think that's it for the heroes. I just talked about it superficially, so feel free to comment down below if there's any further questions. Now to the long-awaited part, familiars on the wall. Here there are 2 things that you really need to take into account when deciding familiars on the wall. Your troop count and the predicted damage when taking a hit in whatever situation you want to deal with the most. They're important factors since they determine the familiars that should go on the wall. If you have no idea of how much damage you would take, I suggest you ask the rally lead in your guild to test it on a camp with 1/1000 scale. Otherwise, experience a real hit. So, let's start with free-to-play lineup. Let's say you have 20 to 40 million. I think most people fall into 4 to 7 million of damage when you get countered and you want to reduce that. For the ranged front, I think these three are the best that I recommend to everyone within this region. Now, if you have a fourth slot, you can add either Griffin or Tempestite if you predict your damage to be 6 to 7 million. That would easily proc them, because they activate when 10% of your entire troops die. However, if you're not sure you get enough damage to activate them, you can go for either Sorcerer, which procs at 10% of damage on the ranged only, or Hearty Feast. You could also go for Piercing Spike, but if your opponent has crazy stat, since it's an additive debuff, it might make little difference. The HP debuff becomes more effective when the opponent is a not so good rally lead. Now you might be wondering why there's Pyrus. If you think about it, the majority of opponents will do Inf Blast in Inf Phalanx without buffer troops, so there's a high chance that the first 200% squad attack will hit the opponent's main squad. The squad attacks most likely don't get absorbed by the buffer troops, whereas if you put other troop type as your front, most likely the first activated hero's tactical skill with the Pyrus buff will get absorbed by the buffer troops. So only when you put the ranged as your front does the Pyrus become effective. With the fifth slot, you could have one of the 4 army talents I've recommended: Griffin, Tempestite, Sorcerer, or Piercing Spike. At this point, you might be worried the familiars are too ranged heavy. In my opinion, that's totally fine because chances are they will activate even in ranged on ranged situation. And when you counter, you could still get like Shield Familiar and Magus to activate, but you take only 1 to 2 million reds regardless of familiars, so you can't care less about that circumstance. But if you want to take care of that situation more than when you get countered, keep watching. Next, if you have more than like 50 million troops, or you're confident to get the counter most of the time, it gets really hard to proc familiars that activate upon damage. What you could get on the wall is Hearty Feast and 3 debuffs and Aquarius in the 5th slot, the classic lineup people have been using. The advantage of this listing is that you can take care of the situation in which you counter and reduce the damage by a little bit more stably. You could maybe put the new familiar talent because it procs very early. But I personally prefer preparing for the worst, even if you're doing a trap. Next, if you don't have enough troops to cap a leader, like under 50 million troops, you should definitely put familiars that activate upon damage. So what I put as a free-to-play lineup is this, in case you're sitting in ranged front. You could also put a stacker for the front line, but bear in mind that when you get countered, the stacker is often useless in reducing your losses. Also, even though it's free to play, it's still kinda hard to max out the ones that require brilliant talent orbs. So without those, my recommendation would be this. Now, if you want to go for the pay-to-play lineup, it becomes a little simpler. Also, if you're at that level, your gear research should be already optimized for battles. In that case, even when you get countered, your reds tend to be lower than a free-to-play counterpart. Assuming your troop count is 20 to 30 million, I would put the Pact 5 Familiars that does 600% damage. It only needs 4% of the entire troops, so it actually procs early, especially when you get countered. And they do tons of damage. When I actually took rallies in full champ gear at around 20 million troop count, the Pact 5 Familiars did an instant 500k damage to the opponent, which is a massive drop. The more troops you have, the more damage they'll do to the opponent. The rest would be Shield Familiar and Magus. Magus is not significantly better than Sorcerer in this context, so there's no need to rush. You can also put Pyrus on the wall in case you're ranged front. If you have more than 30 or 40 million troops, there's really no option other than the free-to-play lineup, because the pay-to-play familiars only activate upon damage. The only viable pay-to-play option is the shield familiar. However, if you want to last longer during your sleep, having the pay-to-play lineup recommended just before could become quite beneficial as you lose troops. Now, if you don't have enough troops to cap a hit, I think Maggot, Tempestite, and Griffin might be more useful than the Pact 5 familiars because the damage Pact 5s do to the opponent is proportional to the troop count and you don't have a lot of troops. You could even have a second shield familiar, and actually it can absorb damage from Pact 5 familiars. Furthermore, the second shield can be like an insurance in case your frontline is penetrated. I think I've addressed common defending situations. If you have further questions or experiences with a certain hero or familiar lineup, feel free to share that down in the comment and I'll respond to it if needed. If you like my content, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching and see you later.